Danke für diese Ehre, diese Einladung. I will move on to English, and I would like to invite you all to, if you have questions for me later, to ask your questions in Deutsch, Schweizerdeutsch oder sogar Französisch, wie es Ihnen wohler ist. My presentation is in English. This is the presentation. Convergence of global geopolitical trends are going to overwhelm nation states. And at this stage of our research, we strongly believe that all the signs are pointing to the rise of a European superstate. Massive concentration of political power. And it's not going to be the only superstate. We're going to focus today on Europe and the Middle East, and they're both interconnected. Now, following geopolitics and macroeconomics at the aggregate levels, which is what we do, leads us to think about many things that are happening in the world today. I cannot talk about everything, so I just will focus on those two areas, the Middle East and Europe, and how they're interconnected. And I hope that I will have your attention for that. Let's go. Geopolitical and macroeconomic trends are converging over the next 6-7 years. The process has begun in 2017. It should be finishing by 2024. By the year 2024, we foresee dramatic changes in the realm of the economy, the realm of political process, especially in the Middle East. It is also likely that we see either significant change in the Middle East or a major war. And I want to really say something. Many people think that we are acquainted with war. We've seen so many wars on TV the last few years. We think we know what war is. And I would like to invite you to rethink that. The wars that we're going to be seeing in the Middle East in the future cannot be compared to the wars we've been seeing on TV the last couple of years. Either military conflict or dramatic, significant change in the Middle East is looming. There is also the possibility of a peace treaty, a peace deal in the Middle East, something not many people are expecting now. We have the Middle East. The destabilization is inexorable. And then this overlapping crisis that will overwhelm individual states, especially in Europe. They will be overwhelmed. And they will allow also or facilitate the rise of the formation of a European superstate, possibly a federation. And finally, some takeaways. By the way, please, I invite you to read at the very bottom. One of the key principles of our research is that every nation, every group advances its interests with all the means at its disposal. Just we don't separate states between good states and evil states. Many political research institutes do that, you know. They view some countries as the evil or the enemy. We believe that every country has the right to advance its interests. Iran does it, Russia does it, the US does it, we all do. Here we go. This is a simplification, a summary of geopolitical trends that we see at the moment. I invite you, I cannot read it all, I invite you to just glance over it. We have a massive military buildup. Not many people want to talk about it, but it is massive, it is taking place. The political stability is fading away, especially in the Northern Hemisphere. I see a lot of trouble coming for the Northern Hemisphere. By the way, the place where most clients, especially institutional clients, have their money and their clients' money. Strategic foresight is the biggest Mangelware, would you say in German? What leaders, governments, and investors lack the most is strategic foresight. We can't blame them. The governments are putting on so many regulatory homeworks that they cannot really take time to think strategically. One example, Europe dismantled all its military strategic military divisions because they said we're entering a period of unprecedented peace. Now they're trying to rearm again. What a total terrible failure of strategic foresight. Unresolved conflicts are flaring up, especially in the Orient. From the Bosphorus to Japan, they're flaring up. Allow me to say this, and I'm half Asian. No major conflict, atrocity, war, invasion has ever been dealt with or digested, apologized for, or properly really dealt with in the Orient or in Asia. Partially because of religion, partially because of culture. In the past, these nations were mostly poor. They were not ready to attack each other. Now they're wealthy and they're arming themselves. Radicalization of the Middle East. The rise of Turkey in Iran, by the way, facilitated by Europe. Europe is the main facilitator of the rise of Turkey and the rise of Iran. The US-Iran deal has set the Middle East on path for 2 wars, at least 2. And we believe that one of them will be nuclear. Europe will be most affected by the nuclear fallout, definitely. The NATO's expansion and encirclement of Russia is having its cost. China will achieve nuclear first strike capability very soon. And it will deepen its alliance with Germany. Yes, we're living now in a time when Germany is entering I would say, a very deep partnership with Iran, but also deepening an alliance with China. We also see that the US is not finished and out as many people in Europe wish. Actually, we see the US in a resurgent mode. And all global powers converging, one way or the other. This is a summary. I can't go further detail. If you have questions on this, please come back to me. I won't stay very long on this slide. It's just to show you that part of the source of the analysis we're going to bring to you today is coming from analyzing geopolitical and macroeconomic trends at aggregate levels. And you see how the risk in the world is moving and shifting. Not one crisis in the future will not come from one single hotspot. They will come from the convergence or overlapping of several hotspots and crises or areas of tension. And we monitor them. This is not a predictor of crisis. You cannot do it. It's designed, this model is just designed to tell us how vulnerable the world is to a major crisis, and it is vulnerable. I'm going on now to an area where connecting macroeconomics with politics. That connection is getting more and more interesting and close. Demographics is a very important part of macroeconomics, the one we all like to overlook because we cannot control it. People tend to say, oh, aging is interesting too. Please have a look at this graph. The most important thing about demographics over the next 20 years is not aging. It is the old age dependency ratio. That ratio, in connection with the political process that we have now, is going to do 2 things. It's going to put a huge burden on disposable incomes, especially in the Northern Hemisphere, from China to Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, to Russia, Ukraine, Germany, France, Great Britain, etc. And on the other hand, it's going to increase political instability. The political instability we've seen in the recent years is just the beginning. And the deterioration of this ratio has just begun. We have not seen yet how strong the deterioration is going to be. The US, according to our own assessment, and some independent intelligence gathering, we believe the USA knows that war is coming to the Middle East. The Fifth Fleet is mobilizing and moving. The US is pulling troops back to the homeland and to the Asia-Pacific theater. So the US military has moved now to containment mode only in the Middle East. Let's go to the Middle East now, a bit closer. The rings you see there are missile positions, advanced mid-range missiles by Iran, aiming at Saudi Arabia and Israel. Allow me to say this deal that we are so proud of between the West and Iran, it was well meant, and I think that the people who push it forward really meant it well. But it has a flaw. I don't know how many of you have read the US-Iran deal, the whole thing. Anybody read it here? I haven't met any journalist yet that has read it, although many of them write about it. It's my job, I have read it. There's one problem there. Iran receives a lot of hard currency actually flowing in from Switzerland that allows the country to buy enriched uranium on the markets. You can buy it from Kazakhstan, Russia, North Korea, Pakistan. Iran actually doesn't need to use the centrifuges anymore. They don't have to enrich anymore. They can buy the stuff freely on the market. There is zero restrictions on the missile program and how they use this cash. And that's the reason why Saudi Arabia is arming itself and preparing for war. And Saudi Arabia is trying to obtain nuclear defense as well, nuclear missiles. That's the situation of the Middle East, and that's why this US-Iran deal has invariably, inexorably set the Middle East on course for war. How long that will take, we don't know. In the Middle East, it's difficult to predict, and I won't go into predicting that. But that's what we see at the moment. Of course, everything is a moving target in geopolitics. I say that very clearly. We analyze and monitor this every week, so things can change. And if things change, we adapt our own analysis too, of course. As a macroeconomist, I'm very careful with making those kind of predictions. We don't make point predictions, we just set a trend, and we're always aware things can change. Allow me to say this, now I'm connecting Europe with the Middle East. We see a lot about the Middle East, and allow me to say this here. We don't want to talk about everything that you read on your newspaper. Our research has one focus. We focus on the things that consensus is overlooking or underestimating. You won't hear other things from me. This is one of the other things consensus is underestimating and overlooking. I make the statement, and we believe that one of the main reasons why war and fighting has been so ferocious in northeast Iraq and northeast Syria is because Europe and Iran and Turkey are planning to build a pipeline there in order to bring Iranian gas and oil to Europe. It's not been planned to be done right away, but it's about Europe needing a strategic backup source of energy. That's interesting because Iran is also a very close ally of Russia. It's not supposed to be built right away, but parts of those pipelines are already being prepared or built on the Iraqi, Iranian, and Turkish side. The problem are the Kurds. Those areas up there in the north are highly populated by Kurds, but you see where the pipeline should be going. Any military expert can tell you ferocious fighters have been taken there. Even ISIS tried to keep a foothold along that route. We talk a lot about Europe, here in Europe. It's interesting, we seem to be very well informed, but for some reason our governments and our media don't want to touch that point, that we in Europe have a very strong need for energy and energy backup. At the moment, we're highly dependent on Russia. Let's come back to Europe now. And I would invite you to please read this with me. I believe that in the financial industry, we all still do the same mistake. We have a certain dislike for the political process. I received that at university already. Political process, just uncertainty, trouble. I see that when I meet my friends. We try to take care of the politics once there is a shock, once there is a surprise. We deal with it. We have an emergency committee. But we don't tend to take it seriously. I believe that we are underestimating, especially in Europe, the will of the political, the political class, if you may say so. Politicians in Europe, for the most part, would like to see an integrated Europe. They would like to see a much more integrated European continent. And I believe they're going to get it. Europe is likely to be home to one of the first superstates on this planet. And I think that the concentration of power is going to be unprecedented. Most crises have not been dealt with in the last 10, 20 years. Our governments are not dealing with them. We're just postponing them. Over the next few years, I believe they will converge and they will overlap. The stress will be too much for individual nation states. And I think that many nation states in Europe will be happy when Brussels or the EU helps them. They may get help for exchange of sovereignty. They will give it away. Now, next, Brexit has geopolitical consequences. The big error that we've done in Europe the last few years is we forgot that Britain is the geopolitical military superpower of the EU. And Europe is going to lack it. Because of the exit of Britain from the EU, we have a rearmament now in France and Germany. This is probably the most important consequence of Brexit. Everybody's watching what is happening in Brussels and London. Almost a sideshow. The real consequence, significant real consequence, is already happening, is the dramatic rearmament we're seeing now in France and Germany. And in Britain as well. The reason is, without Britain, Europe is really defenseless. Already a year ago, Europe was not able to defend herself. And can you imagine, Europe has been encircling Russia, but Europe cannot defend herself. Least so help defend the United States or Canada. NATO is a flawed partnership. Europe is taking a lot of risks in the Middle East and in Eastern Europe, expecting the United States to defend her, but Europe cannot defend the United States. It's not even in a position to defend herself. With Brexit, even less so. What does it mean? Rearmament. And we're seeing now how France and other nations are becoming very, very active in that sense. I'm coming to the end of my presentation. Concentration of power is coming. We see democracy, competition fading away. Many people talk about free trade these days. I don't see much free trade. What I see is managed trade. The Northern Hemisphere will be the most affected, I see. These are the takeaways. The major war in the Middle East is just a matter of time. And trust me, I think one of those two wars will be nuclear. When they will be, we don't know. Lack of strategic foresight is rampant in Europe. I think our continent is overmanaged and under-led. Many companies are like that, governments for sure. The USA faces many challenges, but we see the United States at the moment actually in a resurgent mode. I think it's likely that the US will resurge economically and militarily in the next few years. Something that not many are expecting is Germany is embracing China almost openly. Germany is also embracing Iran almost openly. Two states that actually would like to replace the USA or antagonize the USA. They are doing it so openly because they think the USA is finished anyway. The USA is retreating, finished, going down. I wonder if Berlin and Brussels are taking too fast. I have the impression, we have the impression, our analysis points to the United States is not out yet, it's not finished. Religion is probably the most underestimated geopolitical factor of our time. From the Bosphorus to Japan, religion is becoming a powerful factor for decision making. And believe me, in the Orient they tick differently, they use a different calendar even. Flow diversification. Many institutional portfolios are structured for the past, allow me to say so, not the future risks. 80% of our assets, most clients that I've seen, are in the Northern Hemisphere. The one hemisphere that will be most affected by climate change, nuclear fallout, the disruption of the trading routes, the disruption of the supply chain, etc. I thank you for your kind attention, and I hope that this was not too disruptive for you. Thank you, Thomas. Should I stay here? Sorry, shall I leave?
Yeah,
okay.
Christian, thank you very much for your more or less depressing but I think it's important to point out at some aspects that typically are not pointed at, and I think that's great value that you did here. May I ask you maybe one point here, and then maybe ask the audience also to bring up some questions. The superstate in Europe, how do you see the development that we have seen, for example, in Italy, so the rise of right-wing parties, also in other countries, which oppose probably a superstate.
Absolutely.
How would you bring that into?
I'm so glad for that question. It's the best question I could get today. I think there is a huge misconception in Europe. For 2 years, we've been saying France and Germany will be shifting to the left in 2017. People even antagonize me for saying that. They say, don't you see they're right, the far right is rising. Exactly because of that. Because of the far right, because of populism rising, all other political forces, we join together and shift to a more liberal left course, a liberal course. Because of what is happening in Italy, you will see all other forces going in that direction. Yes, the far right is rising, but not fast enough. It's interesting, we have a movement, right? Populism, partially far right. Some other movements that are not far right and populism, but okay, let's call them far right and populism. But because of those things, because of those two movements, most other political forces will actually reinforce or even strengthen the shift to the liberal course. You see that also after the elections in the United States, or in Brexit, even after Brexit or the elections in the United States, how even in Switzerland and Europe, even conservative people decided to support the liberal course of the EU, to defend European liberal values. I think that's going to happen. Now, I don't want to say anything against Italy, but I have to say France and Germany are setting the course for the EU at the moment.
Are there any questions?
Well, first, I commend Cinque Stelle is of course not, it's just a chaotic party. It's not really far right. Well, the second question I wanted to ask you is, what the superstate? You see that a superstate, European superstate is going to be created.
Yeah.
What are the forces that are driving a European superstate? What would be the driving forces?
Twofold. Most political leaders in Europe and political institutions have already decided they want to have, a more integrated Europe. Maybe the voters don't agree with that, but they don't need to agree with that. Not Europe, we don't have direct democracy, so the voters don't need to influence that anyway. The second one is crisis. European leaders and elites will get an integrated Europe by crisis. This is why no crisis is being really resolved. Crises are allowed to simmer and loom. As more crises converge, it will overwhelm nation states. Nation states cannot handle 5, 7, 8 crises at the same time. They will be overwhelmed. We're going to have integration by crisis and integration also by institutional, I would say, institutional discretion. We will see that. Institutions in Europe are going to move forward into integration. Yes, we have a lot of reactions. People want to have their nation states, fraction, people may say so, but I think these nationalist movements are like a reaction to this integration that we're going to see. Now, a lot of people say, will the European Union survive? I don't know about that. For sure, even if the EU has to fracture first, on the ashes of the EU, I believe very quickly a federation will rise. The other, I'm glad for this question. The challenges the world is going to face are so dramatic and so big, Europe will have to join forces to handle them too. The Middle East is one of them. When the crisis in the Middle East increases or stabilizes, we will see Europe also coming together in order to face the situation. When the trading routes will be impaired, and if there is a war in the Middle East, again, we will see Europe having to come together.
One more question on your superstate. I would suppose that you would need also a fiscal integration. I just can't imagine that those two states, with their very different approaches, that they would converge together. And obviously for each state, if you give up your fiscal power, this is an absolutely major change. So I don't see this happen.
I completely agree with you, but the magnitude of the challenges of the crisis and possible wars that will come in the future will facilitate that. From today's perspective, there is no chance, I agree with you, zero chance for that to happen. In the last 5 years, I did our research in Lake Geneva. I met a lot of French people, intellectuals. They told me exactly the same. Never, jamais, jamais. Hein? Bien sûr. But I'm talking about the future. The future is going to bring a convergence of dramatic changes, dramatic challenges in the world. Climate change is just one of them. Wars. And the wars that are going to be coming upon us are not the ones we've seen on TV the last 5 years. Those things are going to overwhelm many nation states in Europe. They won't be able to handle them by themselves. And part of those challenges will be financial too. Let's not forget that. So from today's perspective, I agree with you, but I'm thinking ahead. My job is to think strategically and think ahead.
Eine letzte Frage, Stefan Hahn.
Just one question. How do you see then the relationship between UK and the superstate after Brexit going to evolve?
There are several options for that. But I think that the political solution about that is not that important, really. The more interesting part of that development is how the military is going to develop. Really, Britain, whether Britain stays outside or inside the euro or they make a trade zone, it's all possible. It's all possible. And we actually have 5 different scenarios for Britain relationship with the EU. 5 are possible at the moment. And some people tell me that there are 1 or 2 that I'm missing. So it is possible. Britain will have a hard Brexit. It's possible that there are many different scenarios. We're even actually expecting that Mrs. May will not actually be able to stay as a leader of the Tories. Our scenario is that a new challenge, there is someone that is going to challenge her very, very soon. But that's actually not so important. The most important fact of Brexit is that it has actually set Britain, France, and Germany on the course of rearmament. That rearmament is changing everything in Europe. It's going to have an economic impact, and it's going to have an impact on NATO. It's going to have actually quite a big impact in the coming years. Sorry if I cannot tell you that. We don't know exactly how it's going to be. We think that there are 5 different options possible, but it doesn't really matter. Many people may think it's a joke. I don't think it really matters so much.